Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 22nd of May 2025. We're going to do a military aid update video. It's not a crazy amount to go through, so it'll be fairly quick compared to my normal video lengths. We're going to start with the US, where assistance from Joe Biden's administration is still reaching Ukraine, but no new decisions on further deliveries have been made yet, said the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. We have seen, I showed you a chart, I think yesterday, maybe the day before, of the prospective deliveries of equipment to Ukraine from the US, and they still remain fairly consistent and fairly sizable, given that there have been this time period of, during the Biden administration, a lot of deals being signed. So it'd be USAI funding, which is the funding of equipment ordered from US manufacturers, rather than the PDA provision of Presidential Drawdown Authority, whereby the US would provide Ukraine with equipment from US stocks. USAI was ordering them from manufacturers, and of course that takes time. There are lead times, there are other nations who are ordering the same kind of stuff, and Ukraine doesn't necessarily get pushed to the front, and that means that over the course of the next few years, a lot of equipment will still go from the US to Ukraine, but no new equipment is being added. Currently, the US is trying, though, to find more air defenses for Kyiv, he added. And this is the idea that he had promised, I think it was at the last NATO summit, where Marco Rubio had promised to find Patriot launchers for Ukraine. It hasn't really turned out to be fruitful. Rubio says the US and NATO seek more Patriot air defense systems for Ukraine. Ukraine has consistently warned that its current air defense capacity is insufficient to counter the scale of Russia's intensified missile and drone attacks. Wouldn't it be nice if that PDA $3.8 billion could just be moved towards paying for a whole load of new Patriot launchers? That would be fantastic. And batteries. The US is pushing back, or had been pushing back, on G7 plans to include, quote, further support for Ukraine in a joint statement by finance ministers in Canada for the G7. Canada at the moment are sort of rotating, I don't know what the term is, presidents, or rotating, have rotating control. They're hosting the G7 anyway at the moment. And in Canada, they're trying to put a statement out concerning Ukraine, but the US has been pushing back, saying they don't want to have the term planning for further support included, and they were resisting calls to label Russia's invasion as illegal. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Well, the latest we hear is that finance ministers from the G7 industrialized nations have agreed to continue backing Ukraine. I mean, absolutely, bloody hell, in its defense against Russia's invasion. German Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil said on the sidelines of the G7 meeting in Canada. So I don't know what that statement would entail and what the actions forthcoming would be, but that's good news if they have come to some agreement, and hopefully the US has compromised on its ridiculously pro-Russian position. 2/3 of the 2 million artillery shells pledged by the EU for Ukraine by the end of 2025 have already been secured, says Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha after meeting with the EU's High Representative Kaja Kallas. Work continues to close the final third. Talks also covered Ukraine's EU6 accession. And on that note, the shell note, Kyiv is to receive 400,000 more shells from the Czech initiative, Ukraine's Prime Minister says. And I presume that's different then from the European pledge. The country's opposition party, ANO, has threatened to suspend the munitions initiative if it wins parliamentary elections in October 2025. Wow. So that's the Czech opposition party, not looking to be particularly pro-Ukraine and looking to stop that initiative. And seems rather bizarre, because I'm fairly sure it's Czech companies that are getting the contracts to make sure that those shells are good to go when they get them from far-flung places from around the globe. Nonetheless, yeah, obviously the Czech opposition is rather pro-Russia or something similar. We are developing the capacity to produce more than 1 million 155mm shells annually. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense at a conference on the allocation of 150 billion euros for the EU military industrial complex. So that would be amazing if they could produce 1 million shells themselves. Absolutely phenomenal. France will transfer 6 modern robotic demining systems to Ukraine. These have been developed by Estonia's Milrem Robotics and France's CNIM Système Industriel. The drones enable remote direction, verification, and neutralization of threats, and that's what they look like. So good news there. That the French and the Estonians have come together for that. Themis, so those also provide. That's the Themis, I guess, UGV base platform. So I guess it's kind of modular. This is a demining version of that. Okay, the Russians report on a new Ukrainian FPV that has proven resistant to electronic warfare jamming. A copper liner helps protect against interference. And the drone has wider control frequency hopping patterns than the Russians have. So that's good news there. Ukrainians trying to innovate around issues. And finally, for this section, Bill Browder. So he is the guy behind the Magnitsky Act. He is not a big fan of Putin. He's a British-born American, but actually now is he's been knighted, and I think he's based in the UK now. But anyway, he's speaking today at a very important event at the European Parliament in Brussels on the need to confiscate the $300 billion of frozen central bank reserves for the defense and reconstruction of Ukraine. Feels like the political momentum is building. So he's hoping to convince Europe to actually release all of the funding rather than cream off the profits from them to underwrite loans to Ukraine. Just give the whole dang lot to Ukraine and they get an awful lot of money, obviously, to spend on what they would like. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has said, quote, Russia is at an enormous pace reconstituting itself. They are producing ammunition at a level which has not been seen in recent decades. They produce 4 times as much ammunition as the whole of NATO is producing as we speak. Their whole economy is on a war footing. Now, this is all quite interesting because I've been trying to work out exactly what they are producing at the moment in terms of all the material and ammunition and whatnot. I'm led to believe that sometimes when you hear these claims about how many artillery pieces they are manufacturing, or how many shells they're manufacturing, they generally include mortar bombs as well and tank rounds too. So you've got to be quite careful. I've seen comparing of apples and bricks previously, where it's like, oh look, Russia are producing 2.3 million rounds. And then, oh, look, the West is only producing 1,155,000 rounds. Okay, well, if you're just comparing the production of 155 mil rounds against the production of all artillery ammunition and mortar ammunition and tank ammunition for the Russians, of course, it's going to look, very, very bad for Europe there, or for NATO. But if you're comparing like for like, then it may well be different. So let's go. I wonder if AI can help us out with this. So I've asked Google Gemini to help us out with this estimate. So my question is, I've spelt how many 152 mil shells is Russia producing per year now? Estimates for Russia's annual production of 152 mil artillery shells vary, but several reports from late 2024 and early 2025 indicate a significant increase. So RUSI saying 1.3 million to 4.5 million, 4.5 million being very, very charitable. The Royal United Services Institute reported that 152 mil shell production rose from 250,000 in 2022 to over 1.3 million in 2024. Other sources citing research by Bain and Company suggest Russia could produce or refurbish up to 4.5 million shells. So that does include refurbishment. So I don't know, 1.3, RUSI is pretty respectable source. 2 million, some reports suggest Russia has increased its annual manufacture to from 400,000 to 2 million, and then another one here saying 3 million total, but that's total artillery and munitions. Other analyses suggest Russia's producing about 250,000 artillery munitions per month, or about 3 million a year in total, but that does include 152mm and other calibers, and that's the one that I think often I hear is like mortar bombs and whatnot. So I don't know, I would be inclined, and it's not just because it's the smallest number, but Rusi generally know what they're talking about. So let's say 1.3 to 2 million. Let's give something of a range there. So Mark Rutte is saying 4 times as much as the whole of NATO is producing as we speak. So I would suggest they're somewhere in the region of 1.3 to 2 million 152mm rounds, and the comparison to them would be the NATO artillery round, which is a 155mm. So I asked Google Gemini, how many 155mm shells is NATO producing per year now? So estimates for NATO's annual production 155mm shells are rapidly increasing, with a significant ramp up planned for 2025 and beyond. So here's a breakdown. So the US Army aims to produce 1.2 million shells per year by the end of this year. So just the US alone will, by the end of this year, be producing this almost the same amount as Russia. This is a substantial increase from about 14,000 shells a month before the full-scale invasion. And the last time I reported on that, it was over 30,000, I think, per month. So new facilities and expansions are being brought online, including a new load, assemble and pack LAP facility in Camden, Arkansas, aiming for 50,000 rounds a month when fully operational. Then you've got Europe. So NATO EU members, European production capacity for 155mm shells has been rapidly increasing. By early 2024, some sources estimated Europe's annual capacity to be around 550 to 600,000 shells. So arguably already, like NATO, as in Europe and the US, are above Russia. The European Commission has set a goal for the bloc to produce 2 million artillery shells by the end of this year. So by the end of this year, you know, Russia will be outproduced arguably significantly, up from an estimated 1.4 million in 2023 and 230,000 in early 2023. So then it goes into details. Rheinmetall, BAE Systems, STV Group, Nammo, Nexter, PGZ, a combined NATO allied production. So if current trends hold, Europe alone could reach 2.4 million shells by the year 2026. So by the end of this year. Now, I presume that's what it means. Remember as well, there's Ukraine to think about too. So they have plans of producing over 1 million, as we heard earlier. Combining the US target of 1.2 million shells by late 2025 and Europe's projected increase, the collective NATO allied production of 155mm shells is rapidly moving towards well over 3 million shells annually. But they are, of course, projections, but that's looking at getting to over 3 million annually, whereas Russia is at the moment somewhere between probably 1.3 and 2 million, but they may get it a little bit above that. But the idea that Russia are producing 4 times as many as NATO, I think is incorrect. So he really shouldn't be doing this. Either he's trying to scare the audience, or into action, or he's doing the whole let's compare 155mm to everything that Russia produces in terms of mortar bombs and tank shells and artillery ammunition. So yeah, a bit of a fact check there. Sorry, Mark. Russia sends 20,000 recently naturalized citizens to fight in Ukraine, according to a top official. I reported on this the other day in my morning video. The revelation signals an intensifying crackdown on Russia's migrant population as the Kremlin struggles to meet frontline manpower needs. So the idea is that the Russians here they're still desperate for troops on the ground. Of course they are. And to keep that recruitment level up, they are possibly forcibly naturalizing the migrant population, and that, or at least some of them, and then maybe forcing them to sign up, or at least maybe coercing could be too strong a word. Maybe attracting, making recruitment into the armed forces incredibly attractive with those big wages. Either way, they're using that migrant population to some effect there, if that number is true. Russia is significantly investing in its strategic bomber fleet to match its increased missile production capacity. Kremlin is funding a major overhaul of aging bombers like the Tu-95MS, while also modernizing the Tu-160 and Tu-22M aircraft and developing the next generation PAC-DA stealth bomber. So this is what their plans are. I'd like to know exactly how much they are investing, because I'm thinking money is pretty short on the ground at the moment for the Russians. The Spanish explosives firm Maxam has been linked to a supply of arms to Russia as part of this Russian arms supply chain. Leaked documents reveal Maxam produced explosives used in arms-related operations, as per the Insider. That is a real kick in the teeth when you see these Western entities involved in arming Russia. I'm hoping that's a loophole, and that loophole can be closed. What's better, or then breaking the law and breaking sanctions, and then you come down on them heavily? I don't know what's better, but whatever the explanation is, I hope that stops pretty damn soon. And Russia is now fielding apparently nuclear-tipped air-to-air missiles, as per US intelligence, likely based on the R-37M. This Cold War-style weapon marks a rare and dangerous escalation in Moscow's nuclear arsenal. So yeah, that is a little bit worrying. I guess it's going to be similar to the depleted uranium, both armor and weapons and munitions you get that have been provided. So when the UK provided Ukraine with the Challenger 2 tanks, we also provided them with shells to be fired from them, which had, I think it's depleted uranium warheads on them, so that it's about the density of the metal there. But I nuclear tipped, I don't know if that's the same sort of thing. No, this genuinely looks like nuclear armed air-to-air missiles. Yeah, this isn't what I was talking about. So, okay, according to the report, Russia is expanding its nuclear forces by adding new capabilities, including nuclear air-to-air missiles and novel nuclear systems. Russia probably maintains a nuclear stockpile of about 1,550 deployed strategic warheads and up to 2,000 non-strategic warheads. The same passage, which outlines Russia's weapons of mass destruction capabilities, also highlights the establishment of nuclear-capable missiles and aircraft in Belarus, something that you can read more about linked there. This is a report published in DIA, that's a Defense Intelligence Agency from the Pentagon, in a report from them. The report briefly describes Russia's use of nuclear-related rhetoric and military exercises in relation to the war in Ukraine, before noting that Moscow would be, quote, very unlikely to use nuclear weapons in the conflict unless Russian leadership judged it faced an existential threat to the regime. Mention is also given to Russia's likely expansion of its chemical and biological warfare programs. However, the undisclosed type of nuclear armed air-to-air missile is the only specific type of tactical or strategic weapon named as such in this section. The R-37M, a product of the Vimpel Missile Design Bureau, was developed for the MiG-31 Foxhound Heavy Interceptor before later being adopted for the Su-30SM and the Su-35S flanker multi-role fighters and the Su-57 Felon stealth fighter prior to the war in Ukraine, in which the R-37M has apparently been a notable threat to Ukrainian air operations. In-service examples of the weapon were very rarely seen. So, yeah, I don't know what this means going forward, but they look to, this could be some more, I guess, saber rattling. But this is kind of not an announcement by the Russians, but a declaration in a Pentagon report. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you think this means, if anything. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.